How many of y'all know what movie this picture is from? If you do, blurt it out. Just go for it. Yes, Dead Poets Society. It's a fantastic film. In the film, Robin Williams plays Mr. Keating. He's a teacher. And in this scene particularly, he takes his class to the trophy case at the school. And he lines them up and he has them look at this trophy case of pictures of people from decades past and trophies from decades past. And he encourages them to step up to the trophy case and to peruse the faces of the past. And the camera zooms in and all of the students look at these images. They look at these trophies, and as they do, Robin Williams' character reminds them that the boys in the photos aren't that much different than they are. He reminds them that the individuals in those photos from 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, each and every one of the boys in that photo felt that they were invincible. They believed they were destined for great things. Their eyes were full of hope. And then there's this long pause in the film. And Robin Williams' character follows it up with this. He says, "These boys are now fertilizing daffodils." And it's sort of this like, whoa, what? And from there, Mr. Keating, Robin Williams' character, he encourages his students to seize the day. Who knows what term he uses? Carpe diem, seize the day, to believe that they're destined for greatness, and encourages them to live fully, to live passionately. However, as we turn to the book of Ecclesiastes, which is what we're going to be studying today, we're met with sort of a sobering reality, if you will, that challenges this optimistic view that we see from Robin Williams' character. Ecclesiastes exposes the harsh truth of life under the sun, where the relentless pursuit of achievement and fulfillment often leads us to frustration. It compels us to confront the futility of our efforts when they are disconnected from a greater purpose. And what we're going to see time and time and time again throughout the book of Ecclesiastes is that everything is meaningless without Jesus. The book of Ecclesiastes, it starts at meaningless, everything is meaningless. What an encouraging word. Isn't that an encouraging word? I hope y'all came to be encouraged today. But what we see throughout the book of Ecclesiastes is what the author, what the teacher is saying is that, yes, everything is meaningless without Jesus. There's a pastor by the name of Tim Keller, and he says this to the humanist. He says, if your origin is insignificant and if your destiny is insignificant, then have the guts to admit that your life is insignificant. We are just accidents heading for annihilation. If we are just accidents heading for annihilation, then nothing we do matters. And apart from Christ, he's right. That apart from Christ, nothing we do matters. But as believers, we are created in the image of God. We are destined for eternity. Then our life is full of purpose. Every action matters because you are part of a divine story that echoes for all of eternity. And what we're going to see as we look at Ecclesiastes chapter 1 today is that our frustration under the sun leads us to the fulfillment only found in the sun. Notice what I did with the spelling of sun there? I changed it. Y'all saw that? I was pretty excited about that, okay? Y'all aren't nearly as excited as I was, but thank you. Our frustrations under the sun lead us to the fulfillment only found in the sun. And I want to give you a little bit of background information to the book that we're going to be studying, to the book of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes 1, if you have your Bible, go ahead and turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1. We're going to start at the beginning, and over the next 12 weeks, we're going to work our way all the way to the end. Does that sound good? All right. The words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. Now, I want you to pay attention. There's a word that's repeated here. So pay attention. I think it'd be pretty easy to pick up. Absolute futility, says the teacher. Absolute futility. Everything is futile. All right, what word's repeated? What word? Futile is repeated multiple times, or in some translations, the word vanity is used. Most translations actually use the word meaningless. So most translations, it says absolutely meaningless, says the teacher. Absolute meaningless. Everything is meaningless. And the Hebrew word for meaningless here, it's a word hevel, and it's used 38 times throughout Ecclesiastes, but what it really means is a vapor or smoke. This is why we're calling this series Chasing Smoke, because what this word connotates is first that life is temporary. It's fleeting, life like a puff of smoke. But there's also a secondary connotation that this word hevel or meaningless gives us, that life is an enigma. It appears solid, but like smoke, when you try to grab onto it, there's nothing there. And so what we're going to see over the next few weeks, we're going to see that the American dream is meaningless without Jesus. We're going to see that politics and justice are meaningless without Jesus. We're going to see that time, religion, money, wisdom, death are meaningless without who? Jesus. And so we're going to dive in and we're going to see this week after week that these things without Christ have no meaning. So who is the author of Ecclesiastes, or who is the teacher? In verse 12, it says this. It says, the words of the teacher, son of David, king of Jerusalem. That's verse 1. And then in verse 12, it says, I, the teacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem. So really, the one who fits this is Solomon. Solomon is the one who, when it's talking about the teacher, it's referring to Solomon, because Solomon's the only one of David's sons to rule over a united Israel from Jerusalem. However, some do believe for textual reasons that someone else wrote the book and is alluding to Solomon. I don't hold that view, but some people think that. But let's ask the question, who is Solomon? Who is the individual, the teacher in this book? Well, he was David's son. He was the third king of Israel. He asked God in 1 Kings 3, God offers him, he says, ask me what you want. And what does Solomon ask for? Wisdom. He asked God for wisdom, and so God gives that to him. And we see in Proverbs and Song of Solomon and in Ecclesiastes, we see that wisdom of Solomon. But he asked for wisdom, but God gives him wisdom and everything else too. Solomon is an incredibly wise and rich individual. He builds the temple. But that's what we see at the beginning, that Solomon is this wise man who builds the temple and he's incredibly rich. But one author says this about the end of Solomon's life. The wisest man in the ancient world became a greedy, lustful, power-hungry, idolatrous fool. So Solomon started well, but did he end well? No. He becomes a greedy, lustful, power-hungry fool. Solomon, rather than enjoying God, begins to enjoy his riches. He enjoys the things of the world. And what happens? Those things pull him away from the God that he was created to worship. But if we think about it, who better to discuss the futility of this world than Solomon? He had experienced it. He had it all. And at the end of his life, everything that he had in this world, what does he say about it? It's meaningless. And that's why we understand that our frustrations under the sun lead us to the fulfillment only found in the Son. That if we want fulfillment, it is only found in Jesus Christ. It's not found in the things of this world. And we're going to dive into the text and break this down. The first thing that we see in verses 3 through 11 is this idea of grinding without gain. Verse 3, it says, what does a person gain for all his efforts that he labors at under the sun? And when Solomon says under the sun, he's referring to an earthly perspective. He's looking at things from an earthly perspective, and he says, a generation goes, a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets. Panting, it hurries back to the place where it rises. Gusting to the south, turning to the north, turning. Turning goes the wind, and the wind returns in its cycle. All the streams flow to the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are wearisome. More than anyone can say, the eye is not satisfied by seeing, or the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done. There is nothing new under the sun. Can one say about anything, look, this is new? It's already existed in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of those who came before and of those who will come after. There will also be no remembrance by those who follow them. Essentially, he's saying meaningless, meaningless. Everything is meaningless. Or in the words of the Rolling Stones, he's saying, I can't get no. Good job, guys. I was proud of you for that one. Yes, that's what he's saying. I can't get any satisfaction. It doesn't matter how much I work. I gain nothing. But doesn't this describe the human condition pretty well if we're honest? We're always looking for the next thing, aren't we? I mean, if you think about life, maybe when you're young, you're living at home, you say, I can't wait to get to college and finally live on my own and make my own rules and pay my own bills. Okay, nobody says that. Let's just be honest. But when you get to college, then, well, I can't wait to finish studying so I can get a real job and earn money. And then you get your first job. And that money doesn't go as far as you thought it would go. Can I get an amen? Okay, thank you. But you get that job and you say, I can't wait to get married, to buy a house, to start a family. And then you get married, you have kids. You say, man, I can't wait to get a raise so that I can remodel the kitchen, so that I can go on that dream vacation, so I can add a pool to the backyard, I can buy a boat, whatever. And then finally you get that promotion, you say, man, I can't wait to earn just a little bit more. Interestingly enough, John D. Rockefeller, who was the first billionaire, he was asked, how much is enough? And you want to know what his answer was? Just a little bit more. And it's easy for us to look at Rockefeller and be like, you pompous jerk, how could you say that? But isn't that our attitude as well? We always want just a little bit more. And we see the author, the teacher gives us the example of the sun, that the sun rises, sets, and rushes back, stuck in an endless loop. He gives us the example of the wind. The wind keeps turning, chasing its own tail, stuck in an endless cycle. And then in verse 7, he talks about the streams that keep flowing. But the ocean never says enough, always taking, but never full. The teacher paints a picture of nature caught in a relentless, endless loop, and then hits us with this truth. Our lives are spinning in that same exhausting cycle. In verse 8, Solomon highlights that similarity, saying, we can never say, see, or hear enough. And then in verse 9, he says, what has been will be again, and what has been done will be done again. There is nothing new, what? Under the sun. What he's ultimately saying is that for all this grinding, for all this toil, how much gain is there really? Not much. And we see this in our own lives. How many of you have ever folded laundry? You know what I'm talking about. You spend an hour folding, and you want to know what happens when you're done folding? Your wife dumps another basket of clean laundry for you to fold. This might be testimony time for me. I don't know. But that's what happens. It's never ending. Or you wash dishes, and then you have another meal. And what is there again to be washed? But more dishes. You change the oil in your car, but already you need to change it again. Your kids are teenagers. They ace a test, but you want to know what's coming? Another test. And so it seems that for all our toil, do we really gain anything in the grand scheme of things? Having examined nature and confronted the harsh truth of grinding without gain, Solomon now turns the spotlight on his own life in verses 12 through 18, sharing his personal journey as a testament to the fact that nothing truly satisfies, illustrating our tendency of craving what cannot complete. And so we go from grinding without gain to craving what cannot complete. And we can relate to this. There are things that we crave that, do they really complete us? No. We see in verse 12, I, the teacher, have been king over Israel and Jerusalem. I applied my mind to examine and explore through wisdom all that is done under heaven. God has given people this miserable task to keep them occupied. I have seen all the things that are done under the sun and have found everything to be futile, a pursuit of the wind. What is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. I said to myself, see, I have amassed wisdom far beyond all those who were over Jerusalem before me. And my mind has thoroughly grasped wisdom and knowledge. I applied my mind to know wisdom and knowledge, madness and folly. I learned that this too is a pursuit of the wind. For with much wisdom is much sorrow. As knowledge increases, grief increases. Now remember, who is the teacher? Who is Solomon? He's the wisest, richest, most powerful person at that time. So the wisest, richest, most powerful person, what does he say? He says, I have seen all the things. I've experienced everything that the world has to offer. I've seen all the things that are done under the sun and have found everything to be futile, a pursuit of the wind. Now, let me ask you this. Imagine we go out in the parking lot after the service and there's somebody out there and they have a net and they're just running around trying to catch something. And you go up to them, ma'am, sir, what are you trying to catch? They say, well, I'm trying to catch the wind. Not like, what would we do to that person? We'd be like, hey, there's a special hospital that I would like to call, and we can take you there right now. Because are you going to catch the wind? No, that's the point that Solomon is making. We're never going to catch the wind. All these things that we crave, we're never going to catch them. Yet we chase these things fervently, don't we? I love here where Solomon says, he says, what is crooked cannot be straightened. What is lacking cannot be counted. And when he uses the word crooked here, what he's really using, it's a metaphor for sin. What he's saying is that our world is sinful. Our world is fallen, and there is nothing that we can do to fix it. Nothing. Alistair Begg, he says it this way. He says, we are trying to line up the squares on the Rubik's Cube with a couple of colors missing. That's what it's like. We're trying to fix the world, but we don't even have all the colors. Danny Aiken says, no amount of pleasurable experience, job success, or religious ritual can fix what is broken. How many of y'all feel so encouraged by the sermon so far? You're like, man, I feel so good about this. But this is what Solomon talks about, that everything is meaningless except if we know who. Everything is meaningless without who. But if we have Christ, that gives everything meaning and purpose. So where does this grinding without gain and craving what cannot complete, where does it leave us? The grinding without gain and craving what cannot complete inevitably leaves us feeling frustrated. Experiencing this world apart from Christ leaves us frustrated. And this frustration is precisely the point the author is making. Our relentless efforts and desires, when pursued apart from Christ, only lead to emptiness. C.S. Lewis, I think he says it really well. He says, if I find in myself a desire which nothing in this world can satisfy, The only logical explanation is that I was made for another world. The things of this world do not satisfy. And it's because we were made for another world. We were made to be in communion with our Heavenly Father. The good news is that this frustration isn't the end of the story. The frustration that we experience this side of heaven is not the end of the story. In recognizing our limitations and the futility of our pursuits, we're pointed to the only source of true fulfillment, which is who? Jesus Christ. And this brings us to our final point, that frustration that fuels faith, highlighting how our discontentment with worldly pursuits stirs a longing for the eternal. Our discontentment with worldly pursuits stirs a longing for the eternal. When we are frustrated by the things of this world, really what that frustration does is it builds in us a longing that this world is not our home. That one day there will be no more pain, no more suffering, no more tears, because we will be with Christ. We see this in Ecclesiastes 12. Ecclesiastes, which starts meaningless, everything is meaningless. It ends this way in chapter 12, verse 13. When all has been heard, the conclusion of the matter is this: fear God and keep his commands, because this is for all humanity. For God will bring every act to judgment, including every hidden thing, whether good or evil. You see, up until now, Ecclesiastes has felt sort of like a heavy weight, dragging us through the cycles of futility and disillusionment. But just as a plot twist can completely transform our understanding of a story, the end of Ecclesiastes flips the narrative on its head. Think about those iconic movie endings, like the shocking revelation in Psycho, the eye-opening moment in The Truman Show, the mind-bending conclusion of Inception, or the unexpected turns in The Prestige. Each of these films leaves us reeling, forcing us to reevaluate everything we thought we knew. Similarly, the conclusion of Ecclesiastes invites us to see our frustrations and struggles in a new light, leading us toward a profound realization that redefines our journey. And it's interesting, is Paul actually there's no direct quotes of Ecclesiastes in the New Testament, but Paul pretty clearly alludes to the book of Ecclesiastes in Romans 8:20. He says, "For the creation was subject to futility." Same word that we saw earlier. "Not willing, but because of him who subjected it, in the hope that the creation itself will also be set free from the bondage to decay and the glorious freedom of God's children." What is Paul saying here? He's saying that just as a compass points us north, our frustrations in this life are designed to guide us toward the ultimate hope found in eternity. It's like this. If I had a pair of blue sunglasses and I put them on in this room, what's going to happen? What color are all of you going to be? You're going to be blue. Why? Because I'm seeing the situation with a different set of eyes. Similarly, the frustration we feel this side of heaven is meant to help us view things with a different set of lenses, so that we view the suffering, the pain of this world through the light of eternity. One author says, "Now the seemingly mundane things of life, if we understand that everything is meaningless apart from Christ, the seemingly mundane things of life, like scrubbing a dish, working a 9-to-5 job, and changing a diaper, are shot through with meaning, because Jesus says in Matthew 25:14-30, that those who are faithful over the small things are given responsibility over great things in his kingdom." Our frustrations under the sun lead us to the fulfillment only found in the Son. Ecclesiastes starts meaningless. Everything is meaningless. But ends when all has been heard. The conclusion of the matter is fear God and keep his commands. And that's my prayer, that as we go through this series, we would realize that apart from Christ, everything truly is meaningless.